So quiet kid gets cornered by bullies. They had no idea he's an MMA champion's son. Oliver Jenkins hunched his shoulders as he walked through the hallway of Westridge High School, trying to make his slightly pudgy frame as small as possible. At 15, he was the new kid again, thanks to his mother's job transfer. Being the new kid in sophomore year was bad enough, but his round glasses, second-hand clothes, and tendency to stammer when nervous made him an instant target. What no one at Westridge knew was that Oliver's father, whom he spent summers and holidays with after his parents' divorce, was Diego the Hurricane Jenkins, a former MMA champion who now ran one of the most prestigious mixed martial arts training centers in the country. Since the age of 7, Oliver had trained with his father during every visit, learning techniques most professional fighters would envy. But his mother had always been adamant. Fighting was for self-defense only, never to show off or intimidate. "Hey, Pudge boy, where do you think you're going?" The sharp voice of Brandon Mitchell, Westridge's self-proclaimed king of the sophomore class, cut through the hallway chatter. Brandon stood 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders from playing football and a perpetual sneer that made teachers look the other way rather than deal with his attitude. Flanking Brandon were his loyal followers, Tyler Reed, a lanky track star with a mean streak, and Devin Carter, whose large build and limited vocabulary made him the perfect enforcer for Brandon's schemes. Oliver kept his eyes down. "Just keep walking. Don't engage. It's not worth it." "I asked you a question, new kid." Brandon stepped directly into Oliver's path, forcing him to stop. Just heading to biology," Oliver answered, his stammer betraying his nervousness. Just heading to biology," Tyler mimicked, earning laughs from the growing circle of onlookers. "You've got a toll to pay for using this hallway," Brandon declared. "Empty your pockets." Oliver shook his head. "I don't have any money." "Then I guess we'll have to take something else." Brandon grabbed Oliver's backpack and upended it, scattering books, papers, and pencils across the floor. The crowd of students either laughed or quickly averted their eyes, not wanting to become the next target. Ms. Patel, the English teacher, poked her head out of her classroom at the commotion, but quickly retreated when she saw Brandon involved. The school's unofficial policy seemed to be avoiding confrontation with the football players at all costs. Oliver knelt down, silently gathering his belongings, while Brandon and his friends laughed above him. "See you at lunch, Pudge," Brandon called as he finally walked away. "Save me your dessert." Oliver finished collecting his things, his face burning with humiliation. In his head he could hear his father's voice. "Position before submission. Control the distance, find your leverage." But he pushed those thoughts away. It was only his 3rd day at Westridge. Getting into a fight now would just make everything worse. The cafeteria at Westridge High was divided into clearly defined territories. The athletes claimed the center tables. The theater and band kids took the tables near the stage. The academic competitors clustered near the windows, and various other cliques staked out their own spaces. As the new kid, Oliver had nowhere to belong, so he found a spot at an almost empty table in the corner. His only tablemate was Emma Chen, a quiet junior who always had her nose in a book. She barely acknowledged Oliver as he sat down, which was fine by him. Invisibility was his current strategy for survival. Oliver had just unwrapped his sandwich when a shadow fell across the table. "I told you to save me your dessert," Brandon said, reaching for the chocolate chip cookie on Oliver's tray. "Please don't," Oliver said quietly. Brandon froze, his eyes narrowing. "What did you just say to me?" "I said, please don't take my food," Oliver repeated, a little louder this time. His stammer was gone, replaced by a calm steadiness that surprised even him. Emma glanced up from her book, eyes widening at what was unfolding. "You need to learn how things work around here," Brandon said, grabbing Oliver by the collar and pulling him to his feet. Oliver remained passive, letting himself be manhandled. His father's training had taught him the importance of reading an opponent, understanding their patterns before engaging. Right now, he was gathering information. Brandon shoved him hard, causing Oliver to stumble backward into a nearby table, sending trays clattering. The cafeteria fell silent as all eyes turned toward the commotion. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" The chant started somewhere in the back and quickly spread. Mr. Reed, the history teacher on lunch duty, finally intervened. "Break it up, everyone back to your seats," Brandon shot Oliver a menacing look. "After school, behind the gym, we're going to teach you some manners." Oliver said nothing, simply retrieving his tray and returning to his seat. Emma was staring at him now. "You know they're serious, right?" she said. Brandon and his friends have sent kids to the hospital before. The school does nothing because his dad's on the school board. Oliver nodded. Thanks for the warning. You should tell someone, or just don't show up, Emma suggested. Oliver took a bite of his sandwich. Sometimes you have to face problems directly. Emma looked at him curiously, but returned to her book without another word. Throughout his afternoon classes, Oliver remained distracted, mentally preparing himself. He wasn't afraid of Brandon or his friends. His training had put him up against far more skilled opponents. What concerned him was his promise to his mother. No fighting unless you have no other choice, she always said. Would this count as no other choice? If he didn't show up, the bullying would only get worse. If he told a teacher, based on what he'd seen so far, nothing would happen except he'd be labeled a snitch. Sometimes the path of least violence requires a demonstration of capacity, his father often said. Maybe that was the answer. The C area behind the gym was a secluded spot, shielded from view by the equipment shed and the edge of the woods that bordered school property. By the time Oliver arrived, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread about the confrontation in the cafeteria. Brandon and his two friends were waiting, looking surprised that Oliver had actually shown up. Look who decided to be brave, Brandon sneered, cracking his knuckles. Oliver set his backpack down carefully. I don't want to fight you. Too bad, Brandon said, advancing on him. Oliver stood his ground, his posture shifting subtly. To an untrained eye, it wouldn't look like much, but he had moved into a balanced stance that would allow him to move in any direction instantly. Last chance, Oliver said quietly. We can all just walk away. Brandon laughed and threw a wild punch aimed at Oliver's face. What happened next left the crowd gasping. Oliver seemed to barely move, just a slight tilt of his head, and Brandon's fist swished through empty air. Thrown off balance by his missed swing, Brandon stumbled forward. Oliver sidestepped, using just 2 fingers to redirect Brandon's momentum, sending him sprawling face first onto the ground. It looked so effortless that some in the crowd thought Brandon had simply tripped. What the hell? Brandon sputtered, dirt on his face as he pushed himself up. Tyler and Devin exchanged glances before charging at Oliver together. This time, Oliver's movements were more deliberate. He moved like water, fluid and precise. He ducked under Tyler's reach, swept his legs with a controlled kick, and simultaneously blocked Devin's grab with a forearm, using the bigger boy's momentum to guide him straight into a mud puddle. 2-3. Entire exchange took less than 5 seconds, and Oliver hadn't thrown a single punch. The crowd was dead silent. Brandon, now back on his feet, looked at Oliver with a mixture of rage and confusion. Who the fuck are you? Oliver adjusted his glasses calmly. Just someone who'd rather not fight. Brandon charged again, this time aiming a kick at Oliver's midsection. Oliver caught Brandon's leg mid-kick, held it for just a moment. Long enough for everyone to see that he was in complete control, then released it, causing Brandon to hop awkwardly backward. Stop, Oliver said, his voice firm and clear. You don't want to continue this. You think you're tough? Brandon spat, though he kept his distance now. My older brother's coming next time, and he's going to destroy you. No, he won't, came a new voice from the edge of the crowd. The students parted to reveal Emma Chen, phone in hand. I've been recording everything. One more threat, one more attempt to hurt him, and this goes to the police, the school board, and every news outlet in the state. Brandon's face paled. His father might be on the school board, but even that wouldn't protect him from what was clearly captured on video. This isn't over, he muttered, but the threat rang hollow. He gestured to his friends, and the 3 of them slunk away, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excited chatter about what they'd witnessed, Emma approached Oliver. Where did you learn to do that? She asked. Oliver shrugged. My dad taught me. Your dad must be quite the teacher. Oliver smiled slightly. He has his moments. By the next morning, the story had spread throughout Westridge High School, growing more elaborate with each retelling. In some versions, Oliver had knocked out all 3 bullies with a single kick. In others, he was a secret agent in training. The truth, that he had simply defended himself without harming anyone, was almost disappointing by comparison. When Oliver entered the school building, conversations paused and heads turned. He kept his eyes forward, ignoring the stares and whispers, and headed to his locker. He was surprised to find Emma waiting for him there. You've become a legend overnight, she said with a small smile. Great, Oliver replied, not sounding particularly thrilled. Don't worry, I haven't shown anyone the video. But I won't delete it either. I appreciate that, Oliver said, genuinely grateful. As they talked, a group of freshmen walked by, pointing and whispering. One of them, a small boy who had a bruise on his cheek, looked at Oliver with something approaching awe. Throughout the day, Oliver noticed other changes. Teachers who had previously ignored him now called on him in class. Students who had never spoken to him found reasons to strike up conversations. At lunch, he was invited to sit at 3 different tables, but chose to remain with Emma in their corner. Brandon and his friends were conspicuously absent until 6th period, when Oliver spotted them in the hallway. Brandon made eye contact briefly, then quickly looked away, steering his group in the opposite direction. After school, Oliver was putting books in his locker when he sensed someone behind him. He turned to find Brandon standing there alone, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Can I help you?" Oliver asked, keeping his voice neutral. Brandon shuffled his feet. "My dad saw the video." Oliver's eyebrows rose. "I thought Emma didn't share it." "She didn't. Turns out someone else was recording too." Brandon looked miserable. "My dad's making me apologize. I'm also suspended from the next 2 games, and I have to do community service." "I see," Oliver said. "So, sorry, I guess," Brandon mumbled, not meeting Oliver's eyes. Oliver studied him for a moment. "Apology accepted, but it's not just me you should be apologizing to." Brandon's head snapped up. "What do you mean? I've been here less than a week, and I've seen you bully at least 5 other kids. They deserve apologies too." Brandon's face flushed with anger, but then it slowly faded. "You could have really hurt me yesterday, but you didn't." "That wasn't the point," Oliver said. "The point was to end it without anyone getting hurt." Brandon nodded slowly, as if considering this idea for the first time. "My dad wants to know where you trained. He said your technique was impressive." Oliver allowed himself a small smile. "My father runs Jenkins MMA in Chicago. Tell your daddy's welcome to look it up." Brandon's eyes widened. "Jenkins, like Diego the Hurricane Jenkins?" "He's my father," Oliver confirmed. "Holy shit," Brandon whispered. "No wonder you made us look like amateurs." "Being good at fighting doesn't give anyone the right to start fights," Oliver said. "That's the first thing my dad teaches." Brandon was quiet for a moment. "I'll think about what you said about the apologies." As Brandon walked away, Emma appeared beside Oliver. "That looked intense," she said. "Just clearing the air," Oliver replied, closing his locker. "So Diego Jenkins is your father? I looked him up last night. Pretty impressive family history you've been hiding." Oliver shrugged. "I don't define myself by who my dad is." "No," Emma agreed. "You define yourself by your actions, which, by the way, were pretty impressive on their own." Together they walked toward the school exit. Several students greeted Oliver as they passed, and he returned their hellos with a nod and a smile. "You know," Emma said, "I've been eating lunch alone for 2 years. It's been nice having company." "Even company that attracts trouble?" Oliver asked. Emma grinned. "Especially that kind. Life was getting boring around here." As they stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine, Oliver felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, he wasn't trying to make himself smaller or invisible. He stood straight, his stride confident but not aggressive. He wasn't naive enough to think that one incident would change the entire culture of the school, or that Brandon would transform overnight. But something had shifted, not just in how others saw him, but in how he saw himself. His father had always told him that true strength wasn't in dominating others, but in having the power to protect yourself and those around you without becoming what you fight against. Today, finally, Oliver understood what that meant. As if reading his thoughts, Emma bumped his shoulder lightly with her own. "So, Hurricane's son, what's next on your agenda? Going to start a self-defense club, become a superhero, run for class president?" Oliver laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. "How about we start with making it through the week without any more drama?" "Where's the fun in that?" Emma teased. Oliver looked back at the school building, thinking of the freshman with the bruised cheek who had looked at him with hope. "Actually," he said slowly, "a self-defense class might not be a bad idea. Not to create fighters, but to help people feel safer, more confident." Emma nodded approvingly. "Now that sounds like a legacy worth building." As they walked away from Westridge High, Oliver felt, for the first time, that he might have found not just a place to survive, but a place where he could belong. Not as Diego Jenkins's son, or as the kid who stood up to the bullies, but simply as himself. Oliver Jenkins, who was finally ready to stop hiding his strength.